Three, two, one. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameDay.com. We are back live at 6:30 p.m., a little bit earlier than usual. We've got a ton of stuff to talk about this evening after missing last week. Hope everybody on here had a good spring break along too with our listeners and viewers. But we're back. It's one of the best times of the year too. Florida State back hitting the football fields. Spring camp beginning. Mike Norvell and Dustin Lewis out on the field. He's going to give us some scoop on the first day of practice. A lot of newcomers, a lot of transfers, a lot of freshmen, a lot to like too from reading on Dustin's recap yesterday of the practice observations. So that, along with, we've got Pro Day coming up on Friday. We are also going to talk about Mike Norvell's press conference on Monday. We got interviews too today from a handful of guys that are going to be performing at Pro Day. It is just absolutely loaded. We've got weight changes, which is by far the best time of the year when we get to find out who's put on the most weight, who's trimmed off some fat here and there. So going to evaluate a few of those guys. You know, I love it. It's the best time and best thing to talk about on a podcast. But then we're going to talk at the very end about the future of Florida State basketball after their season ended. And, you know, just understanding and trying to figure out what that entails and see what VZ pick his brain on what he thinks the future heads for Leonard Hamilton and those Florida State Seminoles on the basketball court. But with me this evening is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at the very top. And down below is Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer. Gentlemen, how we doing? Hope everybody enjoyed y'all's spring break. I know I did.
Yeah, you certainly did. I mean, I'm sure you had a great time last week, and you know, leave the network, we'll say quote unquote network, in my hands right at the beginning of NFL free agency. So it's funny how those vacations work out, and I'm gonna have to start paying attention to my calendar more moving forward.
Yeah, not only NFL free agency, but ACC tournament for me. And I was putting out at least 2 articles a day, it felt like, for a week.
Yeah, I got him out on time. Right?
I know. I was impressed.
Yeah, Steve, easy. I don't even really help much there on that end, so you can't blame me for enjoying my time. Yeah, I put the phone away whenever I leave like that. I don't talk to anybody. I just put the phone away and try to get away from social media updates, Twitter, friggin' Instagram, everything. It's just we're always on that as being someone that's covering sports. You're always on your phone 24/7, and it was such a beautiful time not to get text messages or text mainly from Dustin and, you know, just all those DMs. And now it's just nice to put it all away and get a little bit of a break. And it's a much needed reset for what we're about to go through, a whole load of a ton of things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. Also, too, NFL Knowles free agency there, too. There's a handful of things that have happened all over the place the last couple of weeks. So that's why we're on here early, want to crunch in as much as we can with the time that we have. And that's why we're here early at 6:30 on Wednesday. Before we get started, as always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button. Would deeply appreciate it. Helps go out to more FSU fans. But I think everybody's here just to start off, though. You know, we're going to talk spring camp. We're going to talk about the first day. We got weight changes. We also got our spring defensive preview that we're going to run into here in just a few as we go through this podcast tonight. So it is stacked everywhere and loaded for this one. So glad y'all are here with us and we're back at it. Let's get to it. Florida State back on the practice fields on Tuesday afternoon. D-Lou, you were there along with a handful. We had a kind of a small little army there of No Game Day guys out there giving, covering what we thought was a pretty energized practice to begin camp for this 2024 football team. But just take us through kind of the vibe, those guys walking in, maybe who stood out to you before we jump into some more specifics.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. Great day to get back out on the football field in Tallahassee. You know, perfect weather, not a cloud in the sky, sitting there, you know, in the like mid 60s. Give or take, you know, with the time change as well, you know, getting some more daylight in the evening. So it was a really good day for Florida State to begin spring camp. And I mean, there was a lot of energy, you know, obviously Mike Norvell walking in like the Energizer Bunny, no matter if it's 4 p.m. or 8 a.m. I mean, you get the same energy from that guy. And we've heard some players talk about that before, but also the guys walking into practice. I mean, the players themselves were really fired up and just a lot of energy bouncing around. Some guys coming in chirping, some of them more focused. But mean, either way, you could tell that this team was really excited to finally get on the football field and start working on the 2024 Florida State Seminoles.
Weather looked great. It was a perfect time to kick off everything. Destin Hill, too, someone that has been kind of a big hit on social media throughout this offseason so far. Definitely during winter workouts, seeing him in the weight room. This man has been hyping up about everybody that's maxing in the weight room, but then too seeing him walk in, saying it's time to get paid. It's time to get paid. He's such more of a vocal guy, it seems like, D-Lou, coming into this camp than he was last year.
We'll talk about Destin. He had an interesting practice, made some plays and then had some other things happen. So we'll get into that one.
Oh, okay. So you're leading in. I like this really here, keeping the viewer retention here for the YouTube algorithm, keeping you here. But yeah, no, I'm interested to jump into a few things. And I think we got to start off with DJU. I mean, someone that added on a lot of pounds, 10 more pounds up to 255. I was looking at Ben Roethlisberger's weight and he was around that 240 range. And, I was on the phone with you, Dustin. I was like, oh, he's around that Big Ben weight. No, this is more than what Big Ben held during his time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that was a big boy if you watch some Big Ben football. But, going over to DJ, what did you just see from him? Because in your report, you thought that, his arm looked, that's something that stood out to you right off the bat.
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, he's giant. I mean, 6'4". He's listed at 255 pounds, but I mean, man, if he is 255, he's carrying that extremely well. I mean, doesn't really look like he has a lot of bad weight on his frame. But I think, as much as the fans want to hear about it, that was what the media really wanted to see going into this practice. Obviously, our first chance to watch DJ really sling it around as a Seminole. So that was a major focus throughout the day. And I think just off the bat, getting a chance to watch him in one-on-ones and 7-on-7 team drills. I mean, he just slings that thing pretty darn effortlessly. I mean, most of his passes were going deep down the field. And I mean, it was just kind of flick of the wrist for him. And, Florida State in that 7-on-7 period in the team drills, they were able to connect on some big plays deep just because of the way he's able to put it down the field. I mean, over and over again. I mean, hit Malik Benson down there, hit Brian Courtney down the sideline for what would be a touchdown in a game scenario. Had one on the opposite sideline to Jarrell Powers, where Powers leaned out and made a really terrific catch. But so the arm strength, the arm power, and the velocity, I think that comes in as advertised. Then, I mean, he was pretty accurate for the most part. There was one play that really impressed me, and it got blown dead for a sack. But DJ was rolling out to his left in the pocket, and he got tagged up. The coaches blew the whistle, but he still let the ball go on the run. And I mean, it hit Ja'Kai Douglas right in the breadbasket on the sideline. So just, first 45 minutes of getting to watch him sling it around, I was certainly impressed. It's going to be something to watch moving forward because there's certainly a quarterback competition here between Brock Glenn and DJU.
Yeah, that's one thing that's going to be different too from what we had with Jordan Travis. Not really the guy to be your deep thrower threat. When you go to DJ, though, you can see with the Oregon State film, you saw a little bit of it during his time at Clemson, but definitely in Oregon State, he's just got that size of an arm that, when talking to Mike Norvell in the press conference too, he detailed so much of how much speed is being added to this team. He thinks this is the fastest and strongest too, this team. The team that he has now is going to be the strongest and fastest one that he's been able to put out onto the field as a product. And that says a lot too, just because of mainly the newcomers that are in here. I'm also thinking about, like you said, Malik Benson, Jalen Lucas, some speedy guys, even returners like Ja'Kai Douglas. Got to be salivating and liking that, being able to have a guy that has a strong arm to be able to go deep like that. Going over to Brock Glenn, though, what do you see for him? Because I put him, we did the IG story and answering some questions there. I named him as one of the players that I think is going to see one of the biggest improvements in this camp, just because of the way that he asserts himself. And we saw it last year, and the way that he stepped up when needed and got thrown into the fire. Florida game, going to playing against Georgia, one of the best teams in college football last year. I think Brock Glenn is going to take a big step this spring, but I think a lot of FSU fans want to get an update on number 11 as well.
Yeah, DJU was obviously the flavor of the day, but I thought Brock had a pretty solid practice. You could tell that he was able to go through his progressions and really hit some wide receivers. And I mean, it's not very easy early in the spring camp with the way they're mixing up the skill players. So, I mean, the quarterbacks are throwing to different receivers, tight ends, and running backs on any given play, really trying to develop that chemistry. But I thought Brock had a pretty solid day overall, and you can definitely tell that he's put on some weight. He was someone back during the tour of duty workout. Josh Storms really heaped some praise on him and said people walk into the weight room and they're like, man, that linebacker is putting up really good weight. And he's like, no, that's a quarterback. So, I mean, very high on Brock Lynn's work ethic and what he's been able to do in the weight room.
One thing, and I know it's going to show up in the comments here too, before we go into deeper detail of some play-by-play stuff and some guys that stood out. There was a certain person that walked into practice, and it hasn't been confirmed yet or anything, but there's a certain former FSU great, one of my favorite all-time greats, probably definitely VZ and yours, Dustin, but former FSU star linebacker Ernie Sims seen walking into practice also too there in the IPF, yada, yada, yada. Nothing confirmed yet, but wearing some FSU gear. Seems like there's something in the motion of where this former FSU star could be joining Mike Norvell's staff going this 2024 season.
Potentially so. Mike Norvell wasn't able to confirm the addition just yet after practice, said, unofficially, and then officially he just kind of danced around a little bit, had some fun with the media. But yeah, Ernie Sims out there at practice watching the defense, and Florida State does have some open spots on that off-field staff. He was most recently the linebackers coach at UCF, but has also worked at USF in an on-field position capacity before started his career over at Florida Atlantic back in 2018 when Lane Kiffin was in Boca Raton. So he's picked up some experience over the years, and I think any chance you can bring back a former player and especially in a role where they can contribute like that, it's only a good thing for Florida State. And we've seen Mike Norvell prioritize bringing former Seminoles back to Tallahassee as often as he can.
And especially a guy that's already from Tallahassee. I mean, a guy that knows the area as much as anybody, stayed close to home to play college ball. It can only mean good things if they're able to add him to the staff.
Yeah, really, really intelligent player as well. And then I don't know if you also want to know real quick as well. Just going to shed through a lot of bullet points as this podcast is going to be filled with everything, though. But Florida State moving on from former 2013 national champion who was on the staff last year, but Nick O'Leary.
I don't want to say moving on. That makes it seem like he got fired or something. But Nick O'Leary, I wouldn't say that either. He's just not going to be returning. He was a student assistant coach at FSU, and I believe that he earned his degree, so he would have had to get elevated to a different capacity. But either way, he's not going to be returning moving forward. And also senior defensive analyst Shane Burnham, no longer listed on the coaching staff, and voluntary defensive analyst Anthony Midget actually was with Florida State last year for one season and now moving to your Pittsburgh Steelers, Logan, as an assistant secondary coach.
Head in the right direction. I mean, go from FSU to Pittsburgh, you can't get any better than that, I must say. But yeah, just getting through some little things here and there as we scoop through going into the spring camp. But I think we just stick on the offensive side and maybe run through some players that really stood out to you. I mean, it's hard not to bring up Malik Benson. We've been talking about him on this show the last couple of episodes just because of what Mike Norvell has been talking about him. Also, too, after Tour of Duty, mentioning, he's a guy, too, that's been very vocal. You were posting videos about him. He was a guy that encouraging guys during drills consistently. It just seems like he's meshed immediately really well into that locker room, and I'm interested to see how that's been looking. It's only one practice, but you got your first day to check out Malik Benson on the field, and just thinking about what DJU has with that arm and Malik Benson's speed, it just seems like it's just a match made in heaven.
It's only one practice, and with the way that we're watching it, the format that they have this spring due to the construction, I'm going to be able to see more of the offense on Thursday, but from what I did get to see of Malik Benson throughout Tuesday's practice, I mean, he comes in as advertised with that speed. And, I was watching the one-on-ones, I'm going to say, from about 110 yards away from the actual drill. So I was doing my best. But I did notice there was one rep, Malik Benson, I mean, just absolutely put a filthy cut on a wide receiver right over the middle, or on a defensive back, and got wide open over the middle for a catch. He was able to come away with a deep ball later in the drill, and Norvell was on that side of the field wherever he caught the deep ball. And we're at the part of practice, the very beginning of spring, where Norvell, he likes to let these newcomers know how he operates. I mean, you know how it is, Logan. Norvell is going to bring the same energy every day. He holds certain standards for his players, and something that he really likes for his ball carriers to do whenever they're running with the football is to keep that thing high and tight. So Malik Benson, maybe letting it hold it like a loaf of bread, maybe a little bit. And Norvell, he'd already beat the defensive back, 50 yards ago, but Norvell's screaming at him as he runs the end zone, high and tight, and just let him know how he wants to do. But either way, I was really impressed with what he was able to do. And then, he had the catch of the day later in practice during team drills, kind of near the sideline, DJU at quarterback. The ball was a little bit low, and it seemed like it was going to hit the ground for an incompletion. And Malik Benson, just dives under it and is able to come down with it for a really impressive catch. Just for day one, getting to watch him for a little bit, you definitely saw that speed, that shiftiness, and he showed off some of those hands as well. And there were some plays where he wasn't able to come down the football, where he was going up in traffic and trying to make some contested catches.
That's so exciting to hear too. Former number 1 JUCO player, Alabama transfer wide receiver, coming over here, getting a new opportunity as well. They had a coaching change there in Tuscaloosa, but he comes over here trying to get a new opportunity. And, you move over and you have DJ, the guy that can sling it down the field. And I'm just interested to see how he's going to fit early into this scheme, because a lot of returnees, the first couple of days of camp, they get the first jab of, first team reps, but you're going to start seeing some trickling guys coming from that transfer portal that have arrived now that are going to get those opportunities. And he's one that I think is going to be fighting very hard to be, fighting for one of those starting jobs. Honestly, just the way that he's came in and impacted in that locker room says a lot. And, Mike Norvell will give opportunities to guys that will go the extra mile. And those two are going to get along, I think, very well going through camp. But yeah, got to hold on to that ball, and also to finish the rep and add on another 20 yards. No matter if you're already in the end zone, probably got to run another 10 or 15 yards just per Mike Norvell. That's just the way that he coaches. That's just how it goes. And everybody's held to a certain standard. No matter if you're a guy that's been there 4 years, you just arrived, you're going to have to you'll figure it out. It's just going to take a couple of practices.
Another guy that's going to be fighting for a starting job at wide receiver, who I thought stood out on Tuesday, Hakeem Williams. You can definitely tell coming into the spring camp, he's added a little bit of size. He's growing up a little bit, came in as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old freshman, and was able to go through that first year at Florida State, got in last spring. So he's been able to go now through 2 almost full off seasons of conditioning in a college program. I think you're starting to see his body fill out. The former 5-star prospect really taking some steps forward in that regard, comes into this camp in a lot better shape than what we saw, dating back to a year ago, and had an impressive one-handed catch on Tuesday. He's another guy I'm going to get to see more of tomorrow, but he's definitely in the mix here. And if he can show some consistency and really start to develop into the talent that he was at the prep level, watch out.
Before I move over to a true freshman, we can't keep hiding and teasing about the Destin Hill stuff here, D-Lou. You said that he had an interesting part of practice, but had some moments as well. What do you see from the second-year wide receiver from Louisiana?
So this goes more to the defensive side of the ball, because Destin Hill, he was able to make a big catch in one-on-ones, and I can't remember if it was against Quindarius Jones, but either way, he made a deep catch in one-on-ones, got behind the defensive back, hauled it in, and absolutely let him know after the play what he had just done. And then they got into 7-on-7, and Destin Hill was matched up. I'm on the defensive sideline, so the defensive backs, they had been bringing some crazy energy throughout the whole practice, and that's something we'll get to. I thought, for the most part, they were absolutely locking it down. And one of the best of the bunch was Quindarius Jones, and he was really feeling himself at this point of the practice, matched up right there with Destin Hill on the defensive sideline. The DBs were chirping. Destin Hill was saying something. Quindarius Jones was saying something back. And then when the play started, Quindarius Jones just absolutely pressed Destin Hill, didn't even let him get off the line of scrimmage. And he just got tackled by a bunch of defensive backs. So, it was just a funny moment. And yeah, you can just say something about the way these guys are going out there competing on day one when the pads aren't even on yet.
Yeah. I want to say this is their time to shine. Wide receivers, DBs, you know how it is. I'm always waiting for the shells to come on, but it is fun definitely to see these guys with the speed that they have. The chirping, I love it. I think it's great. I think what Jared Verse, that kind of energy that he brought, that competitiveness, being vocal, kind of putting some pressure on guys, kind of put the bar up a little bit for FSU practices and the kind of energy that you're going to want to bring on a daily basis. So that's something that they're going to miss from Verse. I'm just wondering, who's going to be that guy that's going to be vocal. And I think we're going to see a handful of them early on, like we're seeing right now, like you're just saying, Dustin. There's going to be some chirpers, and I think it's great for practice. As long as it's healthy, things are good. Might get a little chippy here and there once we get the pads on. That's fine. This is football, not I'm not going to take a shot at any other sports because God knows what we might cover in a few years. But this is football. Things are going to happen, and that's just what I love about camp, man. Definitely whenever there's no games, no official games to be played, it's just in-house. Eventually, some things are going to get a little rowdy, and guys are going to get tired of each other, but it's good to see first day. Early chirps. I love it. I love it.
And you got to think, there's been a lot of talking throughout the tour of duty. These guys are really excited to get out there and, show off what they've been saying for the last couple of months. And, as long as it doesn't, like you said, get out of hand or too many extracurriculars, I think it's really healthy to just have that competitive energy where, even though this is my teammate, I'm going to go out there and try and bust his ass on that rep. And I know if I get him this time, he's going to come right back and try and bust my ass on the next rep. That's really how you create an elite culture and I mean, get better every single day. Like Norvell says, 1%. And I think the players are really bought into that mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to like Armella versus Verse too. Those two loved going at it, and just iron sharpens iron. Those guys got better. I want to go back to still on the offense here, but a true freshman. I just saw a video of him running in with the running back room, but Cam Davis. I swear to God, I thought it was Trey Benson. I was like, no way, Trey Benson is back. He's fooled us at the NFL Combine. How did he just look in person to you? Because we heard from Trey Benson earlier today during his pro day press conference, and he said I asked him, just about that running back room, and first thing he said he wants Cam Davis to stop lifting. He's already been through the Storms program already for like 4 years, he said, and he's not lying. Cam Davis is just a different animal. I named him as another player that I think is going to be one that is going to see early action in his career at Florida State. But how'd that running back room look with Alabama transfer Rodell Williams and also just Cam Davis? Crazy looking guy as a true freshman.
I said the same thing whenever I was standing near him in the IPF. I'm like, is that Trey Benson or Cam Davis? And I had to see the back of the jersey. I'm like, all right, it is Cam. I mean, he looks every bit of that 221 pounds that he's listed at on the roster. I mean, what can you say? You guys, we've talked about Cam Davis before. I mean, he really came in, it seems like, with a purpose and devoted himself to that tour. He was already a big guy coming in, but it seems like he's in just better shape now as he finally starts off his career at Florida State. So, I mean, that was cool to finally see him go through his first practice. It's kind of hard really to evaluate the running backs at this point, just with the lack of pads and everything. It's tough whenever they're getting into team drills and working on run plays. The whistle gets blown dead pretty quick. But I mean, there was a play where Rodell Williams showed off some really good footwork in the hole and, was able to find the right gap and hit it and make a big play. And that was something Norvell was really fired up about and went over and complimented him on his running track and his footwork. Jalen Lucas had a play where you got to see some of that All-American kick returner speed just absolutely exploded up the sideline. And Kazea Holmes, I mean, I don't want to say just as fast, but showing off a lot of explosion as well, where he was able to get open on a screen pass and, I mean, just take it up the sideline. So there's some serious speed in this running back room, and I think we're going to get to see some of that power that guys like Rodell and Cam Davis are going to bring to the table once the pads get put on. That's when those type of guys are going to shine.
Want to make sure we got a lot to go through this evening, but just to finish off on offense, is there anyone else that you want to mention? We've got a ton of practices ahead, so we're going to be saying a lot of names, but anything else offensively you want to note on?
Yeah, there's a lot to come, but I will say Brian Courtney, I mentioned him earlier, but was able to make some receptions during the 7-on-7 and team period. And I think the most impressive of the day was he was being defended by Sean Murphy, the Alabama linebacker transfer, and was able to get him with a little bit of a move and then cut up the sideline, beat him on the route. And that was when DJU was able to lay out a perfect pass and hit Courtney for what would have been a touchdown in a game. It was probably one of the bigger plays of the practice. So that was something that impressed me. And then he was able to get a couple of short ones as well. I mentioned Jarrell Powers' big catch on the opposite sideline. And I think that was in 7-on-7 as well. He did have a drop. So, I mean, you're seeing, some of the potential, but also some of the stuff they need to continue to work on moving forward. And then finally, Landon Thomas, the true freshman tight end, someone who Florida State, it would be huge if he can come in and play a big role out of the gate. Weighed in at 235 pounds. I think Florida State's going to want to keep bulking him up a little bit moving forward towards the season. But he was someone that felt like he was involved a pretty good amount throughout the one-on-ones and 7-on-7. And someone, whenever Luke Kromenhoek was in there throwing, he was targeting Landon Thomas quite a bit. I think they only connected once or twice, but, still working on that timing, that chemistry at the college level. But you can see some real promising signs there.
Jumping over to on the defensive side, though, there's a returnee that you wrote quite a bit about, and I saw over, a few of the other beat writers as well, just clamoring over him. And this is Azare Thomas, someone that is projected to be a big-time star for Florida State, definitely at that cornerback position. We saw a ton of flashes during his early career with the Seminoles, but now it's time. Now it's Thomas's side. Time to lock down one side of the football field. But what did you see to him that really actually stuck out to you the most? Because you got a lot written on here, but, what specifically, kind of excites you the most?
Seems like AZ is ready to take that next step. And he's another guy, someone who's been in the program now going into his third year. And you can tell that he's really filled out now, entering his junior season at Florida State. That time in the weight room and the tour of duty with Coach Storms has definitely paid off. And, he's already a taller defensive back as is. And I think you can tell there's a little bit extra weight, a little bit extra muscle that's now been added to that frame where, he just looks like a specimen whenever he walks out there on the football field. And he was one of those defensive backs, I was mentioning the energy earlier. I think he was maybe the guy who started all and brought it to the table. Very first rep of one-on-ones, he's matched up with, quote unquote, the most experienced wide receiver on Florida State's roster in Kentron Poitier. And it just seemed like Thomas took that matchup as a challenge, and he wanted to go out there and win every single rep. And I don't think that he gave up a catch to Kentron the entire practice. But very first rep, he's matched up with Kentron, deflects the pass, and I think Kentron fell down. He stands over him and does the seatbelt celebration. And then from there, it was just game on. Every single time, just going at Kentron, getting deflections, almost had an interception. Then brought that into 7-on-7, continued to just dominate that matchup. And then when he wasn't in, you could see him talking to some of the other younger players on the roster, giving tips, acting like a leader. So, for someone who's played a lot of football already at Florida State, that's exactly the step you want to see out of AZ, as he steps into this giant role with Jarian and Renardo moving on.
Mm-hmm. I want to keep it in that defensive back room, though, and talk about another youngster that Delu, you and I have been very high on since we got to go see him in person at that elite camp a few years ago. That's Quindarius Jones. And, we talked about him on this podcast a few times in practices where he's made some plays. It's just, there's other guys ahead of him. We got some vets that you're just not going to get as much playing time, but you can tell the staff and Coach Surtain really like what they see from this youngster. He was written about quite a bit in this as well. What is it about him that you think is going to get him some playing time this upcoming season? Because he just continues to make those strides, and he's such a long and lengthy player there at that cornerback position.
I think, like you just said, the long and lengthy athlete that he is, it really just makes him kind of special at that cornerback position. There's not a ton of guys that can operate the way he does who are that big and that long. And, as you also said, during his true freshman year, he was just buried behind a bunch of talent in that cornerback room. Two of them are about to be selected in the NFL draft. I don't think it would surprise anyone on this podcast if AZ and Fentrell potentially hear their names called at the professional level one day as well. So, that room was stacked with talent. Now there's some guys moving on, some snaps that Quindarius can go out there and grab if he has a really good spring. He was someone that Coach Surtain really gushed about when talking about after practice yesterday, and I think it's clear that Florida State thinks he's someone who can be special at this level. But, I mentioned that Destin Hill story, and it was kind of the same thing. He was bringing that competitive energy, and he got to a point where he was really feeling himself, pulled down an interception and one-on-ones where he did show off all of that length and all of that athleticism to go up there and pull down, maybe one of the most impressive defensive plays of the entire day. So, I think Quindarius Jones is going to be someone to watch throughout the spring camp. And don't quote me on it, but he might end up being the king of the spring at the end of it.
Oh, all right, okay. Taking that from Tron last year and his performance, just for like, I know fans want to hear about him, but Marvin Jones Jr. too. What was your first thought about him? Seems like he's an explosive guy, but just good to see him in Garnet Gold for the first time.
Elite first step. I mean, seeing him go through some of these drills, his first step is what just you're like, wow. I mean, he is quick, very long in person. And there was just a point where the defensive ends were working with Odell, going through some type of bag drills, and he was getting a chance to be tutored one-on-one by Coach Higgins. And I mean, you've got to think that's something that's extremely cool for him with all of his ties to his program and his dad's relationships to, be going through his first practice at Florida State, following in those footsteps and being coached by Odell, who didn't take it easy on him.
Good. I'm glad. And then, Daryl Jackson, he's at friggin' 330 pounds, but can he still move with that weight? It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, I mean, technically, if you look at the weight gain and loss, he lost weight. I mean, he's ridiculous to look like that at 330 pounds. He's another one where you're really going to see him shine when the pads come on, but just getting to watch him work through drills yesterday. He was at the front of this bag drill, and I mean, just the power, just knocking the bags aside like it's nothing. And then you watch the guy go after him who, I mean, there's some strong guys on Florida State's roster. I'm not discrediting anyone, but to see him go through that drill and then to watch the rest of the D line go through that drill, you can tell that there's something different about Daryl Jackson. And I think it's clear that he's coming into this camp with a chip on his shoulder and really wants to show what he can be after having the 2023 season mostly taken away from him. And I think, instead of it being a negative thing, he's embraced it as a positive, and I'm really excited to watch him over the next couple of weeks.
Don't want to spend too much more time. Really, we're going to have a ton of updates on a weekly basis on this show with spring camp updates, so won't have to worry about missing anything because there's going to be a lot of names talked about. But one other one that is going to be a pivotal part in this defense after losing Jared Verse is Patrick Payton. He put on another 15 pounds this spring, and I'm interested to see how he looked with that weight added on, but it seems like he's come in with a lot of energy to it, a little bit maybe of a chip on his shoulder.
He looked fantastic, man. I mean, that was a big part of the defense yesterday, seeing how Patrick Payton moved with that added weight, because that 15-pound gain, I mean, that's one of the biggest on the roster. And when you look at Patrick Payton, one thing he needed to do early in his career was kind of reshape his body. And then last year, that ended up causing him maybe to be a little bit too small. And now with him packing back on the pounds, it doesn't look like it's bad weight. It looks like he's really dedicated himself to the strength and conditioning program. We got to hear from him yesterday after practice, and he's really embraced, stepping into a leadership role, understanding how many guys departed from Florida State and how experienced and talented they were, and then now trying to, step into their footsteps and live up to the expectations at Florida State.
There's a quick question on here. We didn't get a chance to note too much on the linebackers, but is anything really worth noting from that group from we saw from Randy Shannon's position group?
I thought DJ Lundy, I mean, I think he looks like he's in the best shape of his career, 240 pounds, the way that he's moving out there during those practices. I mean, he looks different from the past couple of years. And we saw that kind of going into the 2023 season, like the way that he was moving at that weight. And then now he's trimmed off even a little bit more to drop down right to that 240 mark. And I think that's really going to benefit him because Florida State, they're obviously going to ask DJ to do a lot more this upcoming season with Kalen and Tatum Bethune out of the picture. And that's going to mean him being more productive in coverage. And I think with the weight he's at, that's good for Florida State. And then moving to Sean Murphy, I mentioned he got taken to town by Brian Courtney once during practice, but for the most part, I mean, first impressions of him, he's able to move extremely well, a very athletic linebacker, and I think he's going to be someone competitive in that rotation. Outside of that, Blake Nicholson added a little bit of size, had an athletic pass deflection. It's good to see Omar Graham getting back out there. He was someone that underwent offseason surgery and has now moved to number 9. So, I mean, that was a little weird to see out there. And then Jaden Parrish and Tamir Hickman Collins, 2 true freshmen going through their first practices. I thought that they they look the part for sure. Already bringing in some decent size out of the gate.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, we're gonna have a ton. You'll be at practice tomorrow too. So by the time we record on next Wednesday, we'll have 2 practices. Yeah, to be able to go back and run through, which will be fun. And some of these other things we want to spend so much time on and be able to jump in fully into practice stuff, which there's never enough practice observations and updates. There just never is, definitely, if you're an FSU football fan. Definitely in this time of year too. It is dead unless you watch basketball, but I'm not too much of a major fan of that. If FSU basketball was rolling, VZ, I promise, I'd be dialed in. I'd be Dial McDialdies, but
fair weather fan. It's ridiculous.
It's tough. It's tough, and it's tough. It's rough. But let's jump into a little bit. We'll jump into maybe some thoughts real quick. Dustin, you might have some, maybe VZ, but from Mike Norvell's press conference, I think for me the biggest thing, like I said earlier, he said feels like this team is the fastest and strongest that he's ever had during his tenure at Florida State. And you can kind of tell, and you're probably seeing that, Dustin, right there on the practice field and inside the IPF. And then another one worth noting, haven't been confirmed yet on anybody fully being out yet. Robert Scott Jr., we're keeping an eye on him and seeing what kind of his availability will be. But for the most part, a healthy team going into this spring camp, which is big for FSU. And then barring any kind of injuries, knock on wood, everything runs smoothly. This team is fully healthy going into the 2024 season from what we heard from Mike Norvell.
And that's huge because, you think back to a year ago when we had these press conferences, Mike Norvell, the first thing he did was announce, I think it was five players were out for the entire spring, and there were a couple as well that were limited due to offseason procedures. So, for Florida State to be fully healthy out of the gate, that's huge with so many guys moving on from the previous team. There are some spots to be filled and some competitions to be had, and it's good that it can all get started very early on. And, to go back to what you brought up originally, the fastest team, the strongest team that Mike Norvell has had, is that not scary? Look at how young this team is. You're losing a ton of veterans, a ton of guys that played hundreds, if not thousands of snaps at Florida State. And 3 months later, Mike Norvell says this is the strongest and fastest team that he's ever had. Now, there's some serious production that the Seminoles are going to have to fill. There's some questions to answer. But like we've been saying throughout this whole offseason, this roster is extremely talented. There's a ton of potential. And if guys can step up, grow into the roles that we think that they can, this team has a chance to be just as good potentially as they were last season.
It is freaky to think of. It is very freaky to think of just because you're looking at the NFL Combine and what the show was just put on there in Indianapolis, and that strength, speed, it's freaky, very freaky to think of. And there's so much young talent too that still needs to be developed as well. Mike Norvell feels very happy about this group. Nothing crazy significant though, wild from the press conference. He feels like DJ is doing a good job of earning the respect of his teammates, both on and off the field. So that's really good to hear from. But, also made kind of like a little cold quote here, talking about the transfers and, some teams take a lot of transfers and they look at FSU because they take the good transfers. And so, Mike doesn't usually do that as much and not really taking a shot specifically at other schools, but, flexing his muscle, but as he should. They've been one of the most successful teams in the country in what they've been able to do in the transfer portal. And there's a reason why there's a handful of guys that could be potential starters at other places that are coming over to Florida State to get a chance to put themselves out there on the big stage. And I thought that was a really good, nice cold quote from Mike Norvell. Don't get a whole ton of them, a lot. We had to get a few of them just because of what happened with the college football playoff snub. But I like what we're getting there from Coach Norvell, man. It's fun, definitely, when Twitter gets a hang of it.
It's true, though. You see people point to Florida State and they're like, oh, the transfer stuff isn't going to work. Eventually it's going to hurt the culture and blah, blah, blah. And then, Florida State, they just keep winning and keep having success. You're seeing the program continue to move in the right direction year over year. And now you're at the point where you're going to have multiple of these transfers who came in, some without a ton of production, some who were already proven in their own right, but go on and be drafted to the NFL from Florida State. And you look at the guys coming in and, you can point to maybe the Alabama transfers this offseason because, however many guys decided to depart from Tuscaloosa and land all over the country, Florida State was able to bring in 5 of them. And, you're seeing now Caden Proctor apparently transferred from Alabama to Iowa, now is going to enter the portal again when it opens in the spring from Iowa. And it seems like he's going to be going back to Alabama. Well, you're not hearing about any of that in Tallahassee. You're just hearing Malik Benson talk about how he made the right decision. And I mean, the same thing with these transfers down, but I point to Malik Benson because he was the guy that one of the guys that spoke after practice yesterday. But even going back to Monday's interviews, Ron Dugans, I asked him about Malik Benson, and he said that him and Malik Benson had a conversation, and Benson told him that he should have come to Florida State from the beginning. And Ron Dugan said to him, "No shit." He didn't say that. He didn't say that quote directly. He said no S.
Oh shit!
But that's what he meant.
Yeah.
So I mean, Florida State there, and that's what we talked about before. This coaching staff, they build the connections where, if they don't get a guy, they can eventually go and land him out of the portal. And that's what we saw in Malik Benson. That's what we saw with Marvin Jones Jr., Earl Little, TJ Ferguson. The list kind of goes on there. So I mean, the transfer talk, Florida State has proven that it works for them, and it might not work for everybody, but it does work in Tallahassee.
It sure does. Outside of that press conference, let's jump into some weight changes that we also found out on Monday. The updated roster there. DJU goes from 245 to 255. Food's good. Food's good in Tallahassee. I'm telling you, we hear it from all of our former guests on here. A lot of places to eat at in Tallahassee. D-Lou, there's some top spots too. We need to actually get D-Lou's top spots maybe soon. I mean, I feel like, it might just be water.
We don't have enough time for that.
Damn. But yeah, Roydell Williams, though, goes from 215 to 225. The Alabama transfer running back. We just got done talking about him earlier during our observations. Lawrence Toafili's at 196. Kind of seems kind of the route that he goes throughout the season. He's really around that range. He is a little bit heavier, but just looking at him, this usually gets added on, trims down a little bit, and around that season, he's in that 195 range, maybe even a little bit more, but we'll see what Coach Storms ends up doing with him. But yeah, that running back room, putting on some weight there. Patrick Payne, like we talked about earlier, putting on some significant size, 239 to 254. A 15-pound increase there, and you said that he looks smooth, and that's something that we're going to continue to keep watching there. And then also to Shaheem Brown, I thought 205 to 213 is something intriguing to me because he's someone that is really speedy. We saw him go east to west and making some big plays to start his career at FSU, but Shaheem Brown adding on that size there, I'm interested to see how he's going to be moving at that safety position. Anybody else? I thought Ja'Kai Douglas, he put on another 10 pounds.
Yeah, up to 199, I believe.
Yeah, he's at 189 to 199. That one's I just always monitor those just because of speedy guys. Samuel Singleton too, 188 to 199. 11 pound.
I thought Ashlyn Barker put on some good weight too down there at that safety spot, up to I believe 210.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there was some good weight.
Yeah, and there were some times last year where he impressed us. I don't think we were expecting so much from Barker whenever we were previewing him coming in to FSU, but made some plays, and someone that I think Coach Surtain and Adam Fuller, they really believe in, kind of understood the assignments early on since his early arrival to FSU. Got some youngsters coming in as expected, like Charles Lester adding on 6 pounds here. No shocker, 185 to 191. Marvin Jones added on 7 pounds. Jalen Early actually lost some pounds. D-Lou, you and I were talking about that on the phone. He goes from 290 to 299 to 290. Something to monitor, I think, because this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of him losing that much weight.
I don't love it. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what Florida State had in their cards for him this offseason and what his goals were during tour of duty. But I mean, just seeing him come in yesterday along the rest of the offensive line, I mean, he just looked kind of tiny. I'm not sure if 290 pounds suits him, if Florida State's going to keep him at that tackle spot. But I mean, that'll just be something to kind of watch throughout the spring.
I think some good weight loss here is the Oregon State transfer defensive end. And I'm gonna get it right.
Sione Lolohea.
270 to 260. He lost 10 pounds, so I like that. Trimming off some fat there, getting him a little bit more speed off the edge, and then also to DJ Lundy, like you were saying earlier, trimmed down 244 to 240. 4 pounds loss, but he just looks ripped. Just some of the pictures that FSU has posted, he looks like phenomenal shape. Like you're saying, probably the best shape that he's ever been in during his tenure at FSU.
Yeah, it's only 4 pounds, quote unquote, but I mean, you can't really quantify that to the transformation that it kind of feels like he's done to his body. You know, keeping that muscle, but definitely trimming up a little bit more if that was even possible. I mean, DJ Lundy's been a giant guy since he got to Florida State. And I think it's going to be really fun to watch him. But, you know, some of those other true freshmen, you mentioned Charles Lester. I believe Kai Bates was able to put on some pounds, Camden Fryer as well, and also BJ Gibson. So it's really encouraging to see some of the early enrollees hit the ground running and, you know, start to bulk up a little bit.
A couple of the guys I want to know, Jeremiah Byers dropping from 325 to 320. I thought that was a good weight drop for him. He looked a little stuck in the mud last year. I think dropping some weight will help with that. And then on the flip side, Jalen Brown dropping from 180 to 172. That's pretty tiny for a receiver. And my dog is losing her mind. But I feel like 172 is a really small playing weight for a guy that, yes, he's a deep threat, but 172 is tiny for major college football.
He's a small dude, man.
I was thinking the same thing whenever I saw that 172. I mean, that's tiny, and you know, definitely getting to see him out there during that first practice. He's one of the smaller wide receivers weight wise in that unit.
Byron Turner too, and worth mentioning him too, because that's someone that just throughout every year we're looking at him adding weight. He adds on another 7 pounds. He's at 251 right now. That one's definitely one worth mentioning. Robert Scott added on 26 pounds. He's at 339. It's obvious that, you know, just depending on his availability this spring, you know, it just seems like there's going to have to be some work done once we get into the summer and fall for him. Richie Leonard, Florida veteran offensive line transfer, 320 to 335. He adds on an extra 15 pounds. And if Keandre Jones couldn't get any bigger, he's at 339. 332 to 339, man. That motherfucker big.
It's a massive pair of guards to have on your offense for sure. And Keandre and Richie. I mean, that's two really big dudes. And I mean, you think about Robert Scott at 339, and then you've got Jaden Todd who lost weight 350 to 340. So I mean, some really huge dudes on that offensive line unit.
I do wonder how much Robert Scott's weight gain is due to him still being banged up from last season, and if we see him trim up this summer as he's healthier.
That's what I'm thinking we'll go through. As like I said, summer, fall, those things will be trimmed up with Coach Storms. It's just, you know, just depending on what he can do mobility wise, is probably what's hindering him there. But yeah, Samuel Singleton, I want to see more from him this spring camp. He put on 11 pounds at 199. Someone that got to see just a glance at last year. Be like, oh, okay, he's got some speed with him as well. But you can just tell though, with Coach Storms now, these guys just know how it works, and you know what time you got to be at your workouts, when your lifts are. Nutrition wise is massive. That's something Mike Norvell shouted out to, along with Coach Storms and his staff. They just do a really good job of getting these guys on some good plans for them, just depending on what season it is and everything. So some good stuff there, and we'll see. So a lot of that weight will be shedded off this spring. But you know, just looking at some of these guys in the weight room, Camden Fryer, like holy smokes, that size, squatting that much shouldn't be. Something's not right. Something's not right, and that's gonna be someone.
That's why Mike Norvell says it's his strongest team. I mean, you got a true freshman wide receiver coming in weighing 180 something pounds, squatting. It's close to 500. Was it 500?
I think it was 495, somewhere around there.
And I heard him and BJ were getting some props from one of the coaches out front yesterday as they're walking in practice, kind of laughing about these guys did well at the squat party.
So, yeah, no joke, man. He's going to be someone that, 495, 6 foot. Well, at that time he was 185, but still that size at that time, 6 foot, 185, whatever, doing the squat of that magnitude at 495 pounds. Ooh, Lordy, that's impressive. And I think that's someone D-Lou on the next couple of practices we'll be talking about because he's just so shifty and speedy. I can't wait to hear more about Fryer.
Wouldn't surprise me. I actually asked Ron Dugans, I kind of compared it to Vandrevius Jacobs last year, an early enrollee freshman who kind of stole that role. I mean, he was a guy we were writing about every single day during the practice observations. I mean, he was probably darn close to being our king of the spring, but Kentron was just a little bit better in the end. So I actually asked Coach Dugans, which of these three true freshmen you think maybe could come out of the gate and surprise people? And he said all three of them, honestly, and kind of complimented Camden, BJ Gibson, and LaWayne McCoy in their own different ways. But, Florida State, they're expecting those guys to come in and produce just like they brought in Malik Benson to produce. So it should be really fun to see, with some minutes to be earned in this wide receiver room.
Yep, and it is true. There's a comment here from Kirk on Facebook. Did DJU squat 400 pounds? Yes, sir. He did, and you can see the whole team behind him, hyping him up. But, yeah, everybody's been in the weight room. One of the favorite times of the year for Coach Storms is that squat party. It puts everybody together. They got the music on in the background, hyping each other up. And, usually Destin Hill's somewhere in this vicinity going absolutely wild. So, I would just love to see Daryl Jackson and what he was putting up there on the numbers wise. I'm sure it was pretty impressive.
Well, you saw Josh Farmer got the 615 or whatever. So, I mean, man, there are some crazy strong dudes on this team.
Yeah, there are.
You think about Joshua Farmer, he came in at like 231 pounds. I mean, this has been built. He's been built by Storms. Like, I mean, literally built back to how he came out of high school.
Yep, exactly. Before we go into the defensive spring camp preview, let's just note real quick, late to the party, decide to join in, but Clemson has joined in with FSU and a lawsuit against the ACC. So now trying to team up with Florida State and go against the Atlantic Coast Conference. And we'll continue to monitor that, something that's going to be something that's going to take a little while on how this unfolds. There's just so much that goes into it. But yeah, Clemson just took you a little while, but welcome to the party. FSU had to start off everything, and then now you get to jump in. It's just funny to see the media now not give a shit that Clemson's doing it, but if FSU's doing it, let's all lose our minds and write some blasphemous BS. But if Clemson joins, it's okay, and it's fine that they're doing it. Yada yada yada, right?
People were just mad that Florida State was being loud about it, but they didn't really have a choice because of the sunshine laws. South Carolina doesn't have those same laws, so it is what it is at this point. I think the bigger thing to note was Clemson said the ACC didn't get approval from the rest of its members on the lawsuit against Florida State, and that there's only a few schools that did approve it. I thought that was something that was a little bit interesting. And then if you look at the amendments to the lawsuit, pretty much the only schools that have been reported that didn't agree to it were Notre Dame and North Carolina, two schools who we also think aren't exactly happy with their ACC situations. So maybe there's more joining here soon.
Yeah, I think Clemson, they just wanted FSU to take the flag first, essentially. Because like you said, Logan, I mean, everyone's already got their anger kind of out of the window. And then now they're like, oh, Clemson's joining. This isn't really a surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, well, welcome. A little late, but oh well. If there's any way that it can hurry up this process or get things resolved and say sayonara to the ACC, we'll take anything we can get at this point. So
I do believe Miami was one of the schools they reported that was in favor of the lawsuit against Florida State.
I want to say it was the amendment that they were in favor of.
Interesting.
Broke boys down there.
Tough.
Miami, the ACC, Jim Phillips, Buke, Oregon.
Well, maybe once Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Notre Dame leave, Miami can have a chance.
Yeah, they're about to all get what they deserve. Just due process.
Yeah, he'll eventually kick their ass eventually. Let's jump into this defensive spring preview. We did our offensive spring preview 2 weeks ago. Now we're going to jump through the defensive one. I put out a poll on our YouTube earlier this week, and I asked on there, which side of the ball will be the strongest heading into the 2024 football season? I'll ask you guys first. Which side of the ball do you think is going to be the strongest heading into the 2024 football season?
I'll say defense. I think defense is always a little bit ahead. And I mean, Florida State does have some real pieces coming back in there. And there are some guys that are ready to step up as leaders. I mentioned Patrick Payton and AZ earlier, but it seems like Fentrell, DJ Lundy, Darrell Jackson, Joshua Farmer, all of those guys are ready to rise into the roles that they need to and the levels that they need to be at Florida State. So I think the defense, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does end up being the offense, just with the amount of explosive pieces being added.
I would lean offense just because even if he's new to the system, having a veteran there in DJU is going to help a lot. There's a lot of veteran presence on the offensive line. You bring back Toa Philly, Poitier at wide receiver who can help bring the new guys along. It's like we've been talking about. There's so much speed. There's so much explosiveness, so much strength on that offensive side of the ball. And I think the defense definitely has talent, but I'm really worried about once you start getting down the two deep with some of these young guys that you have to bring along and hope you get up to speed, that part worries me more than catching the offense up to speed does, because I just think there's so much explosiveness on that side of the ball.
YouTube is 50-50. They're completely split on it.
So are we.
Yeah, 665 votes here and completely split at 50% between offense and defense. So maybe after the spring and, maybe we'll run this poll back, but pretty interesting there. And if you're an FSU fan, you probably feel pretty good about that. Not one leaning heavily towards another, but like you said, Dustin, there's so many guys coming back on this defensive side that have some talent, and offensively too for you, VZ. I think offensively on the offensive line, though, that's one of the pivotal parts in how things go. And if you've got a veteran quarterback on the back end, it does help move things. So I'm kind of split as well. I just want to see how things go throughout the spring camp and see if there's one that really kind of leans in a certain direction. And we'll be finding that out here in a couple of weeks once we get through some camp. But let's start off with this interior defensive line, gentlemen. This one, just on some paper here, feels a little thin. It does feel a little thin, and that's something that I'm worried about going into this camp. But start off with Joshua Farmer, Darrell Jackson, Daniel Lyons, someone that has earned a lot of playing time under Oleo Higgins, KJ Sampson too, youngster, and then we've got Colorado State transfer Grady Kelly. There you are. I mean, it's worrisome to me. It's very worrisome. I don't know really what else to say about it there. I'm interested to hear y'all's take on that room.
It's strong at the top, with Darrell Jackson and Joshua Farmer, and also the addition of Grady Kelly. I think he's someone that's going to be pretty solid for Florida State. You look at him, his weight gain, went from 285 to 299 pounds. So he's someone who's already came in and seems like impressed in the offseason conditioning program. Daniel Lyons and KJ Sampson are two guys who have shown promise in their careers at Florida State and are continuing to grow. But, I mean, in the end, there's just not enough numbers. 5 scholarship defensive tackles. They are going to add Jamori Flagg and Denaz White, in the summer. But those are 2 true freshmen, and you can't expect them to come in and make a huge impact out of the gates. I mean, with the 5 that they have, we'll see how the spring goes and how these guys progress. But I mean, I do think this is a potential position for Florida State to look at that portal fall in the spring and maybe make an addition there, because just the past couple of years, you look at Florida State's defensive line. Last year, they actually didn't get beat up too bad. Fabian Lovett and Braden Fisk were definitely limited at times. Joshua Farmer obviously had to have the hand surgery that kept him out of the Orange Bowl. But I mean, for the most part, those guys were able to stick in the lineup and consistently soak up snaps. But you think back to the 2022 season where Fabian Lovett had to miss, half the campaign, and some of the other guys as well were getting banged up. Malcolm Ray got hurt. Dennis Briggs was hurt. Jarrett Jackson, back in those days where Florida State's interior was really beat up. So they might have to hit that portal to add some extra depth here for sure. But we'll see how it plays out.
I agree. I mean, this was a group that went 9 deep last year at times, 8 or 9 deep in a lot of games, and to only roll into spring with 5 is slightly concerning. And I am curious to see if, I know we'll talk about this position group in a second, but to see if any of these guys on the edge kick inside, whether it's the Oregon State Transfusion, I'm not going to attempt the last name yet. I'll get there, or the West Virginia transfer, who I'm also not going to try to pronounce yet.
Well, let me hop in there.
Not.
Let me hop in there real quick, also, because actually during that first practice yesterday, watching the defensive line go through these drills, Tomiwa Duroje was actually working with that defensive tackle group. So, I mean, it seems like Florida State maybe exploring that kind of like a hybrid move there, flexing them between defensive end and defensive tackle. I don't have the roster in front of me. I do believe he weighed in at, I want to say 276, maybe 278. But either way, that's getting kind of big up there.
278.
Yeah, so that's starting to get kind of big up there for a defensive end. I wonder if maybe Florida State, seeing those potential depth concerns over tour of duty, did maybe adjust him a little bit to add on some weight and maybe kick him inside. But
I think that fits his game. If you watch his West Virginia tape, he lined up on the inside sometimes as well and made some plays from there. So I think it's a perfect fit for him, and play him kind of in that Dennis Briggs role that we've seen the last few years where he can be inside or outside. I think that'd be fine. And like I said, it's something this position group needs. You already mentioned Jackson and Farmer as your top 2, and that's a great top 2, but you got to find some depth behind him.
100%. And yeah, to David Hall here on Twitter saying, go after a top defensive tackle and the transfer portal, and maybe the problem will be solved. So we'll see what happens, evaluate.
They may not even need a top one. They just need a good third or fourth guy, really.
Yeah, some guy with some experience would be really nice. I mean, with Daniel Lyons after that, I've got some question marks. Haven't seen a whole ton of KJ Sampson. It just depends on what we get out of Grady Kelly. Yeah, you've got the experience there from him at Colorado State, but still, there's a lot of question marks going into the spring camp with this group outside of what you've already got in those top 3 guys to me.
And we've still got to factor in the 85-man scholarship limit into this equation because Florida State's still projected at that 89 marks. I mean, they need some people to leave, and I'll bring up the penalty once again, the 5 total scholarships over 2 years. That's something that Florida State's going to have to figure out as well. So I wonder if cross-training Tomiwa at the interior spot maybe isn't Florida State's solution of finding an answer to the equation of both of those problems.
Yeah. Going on to the outside group of this at defensive end, we'll start off here. Patrick Payton, already talked about him during practice observations, looking good in his first day, but going over Byron Turner, who just added on some more size, one of the most experienced defensive ends in this group as well. Jaden Jones, someone who still was kind of recovering from injury last year, would like to see some growth here this upcoming spring. Aaron Hester, Dante Anderson, Lamont Green. You got also the transfers like y'all were just saying with Lilo Hea. Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia, the transfer, the legacy. And then also here, West Virginia transfer, Tommy Wa. I'm making up shit.
Duroje.
I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it wasn't what Logan said.
If you say something and you just kind of just drift away, then you don't have to really distinguish what you said,
I don't know if Florida State did the pronunciation guide for the roster last year, but they're definitely going to need one in 2024. I mean, people like Logan, they're going to need some help.
Okay, well, I don't want to hear it, Odell Haggins. I don't want to hear it.
Hey, I pronounced it correctly earlier in this show, actually.
You did Haggins? You did?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Growth is here. But, yeah, we're going to need that sheet, and I'm going to have to use it every time at a football game. But, yeah, this group has a lot more potential in it, I think, too, than what we were talking about there at the defensive tackle room. But there are some guys, too, in transfers, just depending on where they fit best. Marvin Jones Jr. is what stands out to me the most outside of Pat Payne and Byron Turner, just as someone that's going to see pivotal playing time early on.
It's going to be really fun to watch this group throughout the spring because, there's obviously some questions with Jared Verse moving on, but I think it's clear that Florida State has some real talent there, and figuring out how these guys are going to fit together and how they're going to form those rotations is kind of going to be what's paramount. We've seen over the last 2 years, the Seminoles really stick to kind of that 4-man rotation at defensive end. And I think on paper, you kind of see that with Patrick Payton, Marvin Jones Jr., Sione Lolohea, and Byron Turner Jr., especially if Tomiwa is going to be playing inside some at Florida State. So those are the main 4 that I would say I'm going to be watching over the next couple of weeks. I think Byron Turner, he's someone who's made strides throughout his time at Florida State, was able to get on the field a little bit last year, make somewhat of an impact. With that added weight, how's it going to impact him? Sione, his first practice yesterday, it seemed like he really came in and didn't miss a beat and, was working with Odell on the bags, and Odell kind of showed him how he wanted Sione to go through the drill. And Sione, got it the very first time, went through it, and Odell just kind of smiled at him and said that's how it's done. So, I think Odell likes that one. And then obviously Marvin Jones Jr., 5-star out of high school, one of the top prospects in the nation, kind of had a deep defensive core at Georgia and some injuries that set him back. If he realizes his potential, that kind of changes Florida State's the whole way they're going to operate up front, because he could potentially be a star at the college level.
Mm-hmm.
You're just talking about that 85-man scholarship limit. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the groups that we see a little bit of attrition after the spring, because right now you're sitting at 8 scholarship guys. You're adding a 9th and Amari Williams in the summer. And for the guys like Jaden Jones, who, like you just mentioned, is coming off of an injury, Aaron Hester hasn't seen much playing time, and maybe even Byron Turner, if he gets passed up this spring. Wouldn't be surprised to see one of these guys drop off, but I think it's going to be one of those groups, at least once we get to the season, there's going to be a lot of work by committee. It's not going to be Jared Verse and Payton dominating, then having Turner and Eben and whoever else rotate in. I think you're going to see a lot of rotation, a lot of guys finish with 2.5, 3.5, 4 sacks next year, instead of having Verse close to 10 and Payton 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree there. I definitely agree. And you're going to have to see, some of these guys have got to take a big step, or like you said, they're going to be moving on. Aaron Hester, just depending here on what they want to do here with Dante Anderson. I think there's so much to like about Lamont Green naturally and everything. And there's nothing there that I would have concern of him leaving, but there's guys that are in that like 2 to 3 position group range that are you going to take that bigger next step, or are some of these transfers coming in going to take over and take your job? And that's just kind of the way the game is overall for universities right now as a football program, but just specifically too, we've seen it at FSU. Some of these transfers come in and they'll come take your spot. And, that's where, like you said, Dustin, watching this defensive end group will be really big, and seeing who's willing to take those next strides. I'm looking at Jaden Jones. There's so much potential there. I'd like to see him take some strides, and we've heard some really good things about him now that he's going to be fully healthy. Is big, getting over that knee injury about practically like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So, Dante Anderson too, someone that has had some flashes in practice, Dustin, but it's that size disadvantage along with Aaron Hester too. How does that work? Dante Anderson's so fast. So is Lamont Green too, still really young, but Dante Anderson, Aaron Hester, like, how's that going to work? It seems like Aaron Hester is always sort of undersized when you're looking at that rest of the defensive end room and what Florida State likes to put there with Coach JP and that product. So, yeah, this could be one that could be hit with some attrition, and we'll see what ends up happening too, because there's still a newcomer on the way in the summer.
And it's a dog-eat-dog world. This is college football. Like you said, everyone is going to try and look for their best opportunity. And these transfers that are coming to Florida State, they're not trying to come sit on the bench again. They want to come in and play immediately. And, sometimes that means passing up someone that Florida State has had on the roster for a couple of years. I think if you're looking at a guy like Jaden Jones or Aaron Hester, or, I don't necessarily say Byron Turner, because he's someone that's been involved and has been growing year over year, but maybe even Lamont Green Jr. These are guys that are going to have to rise to the level of competition throughout the spring, because Sione Lolohea, he played a ton of snaps at Oregon State. This is a guy that's extremely experienced. Marvin Jones Jr. might not necessarily have a ton of playing experience, but I mean, the talent is obviously there. And you look at the frame and the skill set and the way he moves. I mean, man, if he's able to realize it and really step into that equation and show what he is, he's going to be very good for Florida State. I mean, there's some real talent in this room. I think it's just all about those guys stepping up and, really just taking it.
And I know you guys mentioned Lamont Green Jr. That's someone I'm surprised didn't put on more weight. We didn't talk about it in the weight changes, but he's still in the 220s, entering his second year of college. That's not a great thing. He really needs to get to the 230s, 240s this summer if he's going to become a major contributor at any point in his career.
Yeah, Dustin, you and I were talking about it on the phone. There's got to be size added. They've got to add size to him and that frame. And he's got that natural get-off speed, just kind of that explosiveness like Marvin Jones Jr. has. It's just a different level of speed, but he's got to put on some size. So I kind of put Dante Anderson and Lamont Green in that same kind of realm of where their body, they got to do things with their body. And Dante Anderson, yeah, he's added some size, but Lamont Green, there's just too much to like there. Got to get something going there with Coach Storms.
Yeah, and it sucks because the majority of his freshman season taken away while dealing with a shoulder injury that he actually suffered during the spring showcase. I mean, he had a lot of valuable time taken away from him during his first year at Florida State. And, you got to hope as he, has gotten back fully healthy that he's gonna be able to really shine in that weight room in the tour of duty, on the nutrition plan. Because going from 223 to 227, I definitely think they're going to need Lamont Green Jr. to gain some more weight. And he's kind of been a naturally kind of lean guy throughout his life, I think. And sometimes it's harder for those type of guys to gain weight. You look at Jordan Travis. Florida State was trying to get him to put on weight every single year, and we saw progress incrementally, step by step. And Lamont Green Jr., he's going to need to take a big step here in the near future to get up to that same weight as some of the other guys in his position room.
Let's jump over to that linebacker room. Gentlemen, lost some big key pieces after this year with Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach. Now you move over to some newcomers along with the big-time vet, though, with DJ Lundy. Talked about him earlier. Omar Graham Jr. has been highly talked about with this staff. Blake Nicholson is coming in as a second-year guy who got some playing time actually last year, and this staff thinks really, really highly of him. We're going to see a lot of him this upcoming season. Justin Cryer, DeMarco Ward as well, and then you've got a newcomer with Alabama transfer Sean Murphy. You got Jaden Parrish, former three-star, along with another three-star, Tamir Hickman Collins. What do y'all think about this room right here? This is a lot of development. Like, this is a big spring development group right here, in my opinion, outside of DJ Lundy. Even you still point at Omar Graham Jr. too, of taking that next step too. I think this is just all about developing this spring camp, in my opinion.
I think this is the room on defense that has the most questions, and kind of same thing to how we were talking about the tight ends on the offensive side of the ball. Because, I mean, you've got one guy coming back who has been very productive in DJ Lundy, and now Florida State, they're going to need him, like we were talking about earlier, to take another step in his development and really, be on the field more in passing downs and just on the field more in general. Florida State, he's going to have to soak up a ton of snaps at that linebacker spot. Omar Graham Jr. going to need more consistency out of him as he moves into his third year at Florida State. I think Blake Nicholson and Justin Cryer just need to continue to grow in their respective developments. And then with Sean Murphy coming in, he's another guy, one of those Alabama transfers. Didn't necessarily play a huge role with the Crimson Tide just because, a talented defense, and he was also someone that dealt with some injuries during his time in Tuscaloosa. But, I mean, man, a top 100 recruit coming out of high school, someone who was extremely talented at the prep level, and kind of in the same vein of a Marvin Jones Jr. If he's able to realize that talent, it really flips the complexion of the room.
I think this is a room that is a year away from being really, really good. As Cryer and Nicholson and Hickman Collins get up to speed, I think it's going to be great. And even Omar Graham, this year, I definitely have some question marks. I think they'll be fine. Getting DJ Lundy to return after his, 2-week vacation in Colorado was huge. But outside of that, there's just not much known about this group. And I get your point with the question marks. I'm also right there with the safeties, which we'll get there in a minute. But yeah, these young guys really got to get caught up to speed, and hopefully Blake Nicholson especially can take that next step because he's got the speed, he's got the athleticism, put on some good weight this offseason so far. If he can just continue to develop and grow as in that position, I think that'd be huge. But they got to find that consistent fourth guy because last year you would see Kalen and Bethune sub out, Omar and DJ would come in. Who's going to be that fourth linebacker this year? I'm not entirely sure yet.
And I think, this is a spring where Randy Shannon really earns that paycheck. We saw the strides that Tatum Bethune and Kalen and DJ were able to make over the last 2 years since he took over as the linebackers coach in Tallahassee. And now moving into this year where you've only really got one proven guy entering the spring. It's an opportunity, and I mean it's a challenge for this whole unit to step up and perform.
Yeah. We'll see. You would like to see Sean Murphy make those strides and make this feel a little bit, have some more security after we leave the spring. So we'll see someone to keep an eye on this camp. Let's jump back into the defensive back room. Let's go to cornerbacks first, and this can be mixed in with nickels as well. But Florida State has a handful of returnees, some guys that have had some big time experience too, and some games. But Greedy Vance is making another return. 2 years ago, he led FSU's team in interceptions. Just a guy that knows where to get himself around the ball. Fentrell Cypress too is returning there at the cornerback position. Kevin Knowles kind of in that nickel position, just seeing what they're going to do with him this upcoming spring. And then you got Azrae Thomas, was a guy that highlighted the first day of spring camp. Another one that was also pointed out too, Quindarius Jones. We talked about him. Edwin Joseph, Jabril Rawls. We got Earl Little Jr. from Alabama, Charles Lester, and Jamari Howard. This group has a ton of talent. Just naming all those guys and some of those that impressed us earlier in their career, just way early on. The talent's there. Coach Surtain, as we saw on the recruiting trail, what he's been able to do in the transfer portal too, has been super impressive. But this group has the talent, has some experience, and probably feel them one of the most secured groups on the team overall.
I think from top to bottom, this is probably the most talented room on the entire roster. And I mean, the reason I say that is because when you look at it, you've got a mix of veterans who have played a lot of football at Florida State, coupled with rising young talent who, if like some of these other guys we've talked about, if they continue to develop and take that next step, they're going to be really good for the Seminoles. I really see this as a room that not only has a high floor, but also a really high ceiling entering this spring in 2024. You look at the outside cornerbacks. Fentrell is back, a veteran in the ACC who has been productive during his time at Virginia. Had some struggles adjusting to a new scheme at Florida State, but still, I mean, when you look at his stats, was productive for the Seminoles last year, and I think it makes sense he's going to have an even bigger year going into 2024. And then you look at nickel, with Kevin Knowles and Greedy Vance, two veterans on the Florida State defense. You've also got AZ out there on that outside cornerback, and you're bringing in Earl Little Jr. He's probably going to be competing there in that nickel spot. Quindarius Jones, Jabril Rawls, and I think the true freshmen, Charles Lester, Kai Bates, Jamari Howard, all three of those guys coming in. Watch them at practice yesterday. They were really soaking up reps, talking with veterans about getting in the right spots and just the little things. They're definitely coming in with the right makeup, the right attitude. So, like I said, I feel really comfortable with this room and just seeing the energy that they were bringing to practice. And these guys kind of reminded me a little bit of the running backs, the way that those guys all kind of root for one another, the defensive backs. I mean, we're just, acting like good teammates, hyping each other up, bringing that good energy. And, something just feels good about those cornerbacks.
I am worried about the lack of experience behind AZ, Cypress, and Greedy. Obviously, the talent's spectacular between Quindarius, Rawls, Bates, Howard, Lester. Just so much talent. But how quickly can they get caught up to speed in case, AZ or Fentrell goes down with an injury, God forbid?
Yeah,
I thought Fentrell was unfairly hated on last year. I thought he played pretty well and just gave up some tough catches down the field. That happens when you play cornerback. And AZ was super sticky last year, especially down the stretch in coverage. But after that, there's not much experience. We just haven't seen on the field yet. As much talent as there is, they got to show it this spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Health will be a big thing this upcoming season. Just super talented. I'm interested too. I want to watch Earl Little Jr. I think that's someone. Hopefully, Dustin, these next couple practices, we can get some good scoop on him because he's coming over here. Great relationship with Coach Surtain, obviously being coached by him early on in his football career, but still just to have him here and to see him compete for a job. I'm interested to see if this complicates a couple other things. Iron sharpens iron. I want to see this competition kind of increase here. And Quindarius Jones is someone that could disrupt. I'm telling you, if he decides to make some big time strides this spring camp, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. Or if, like you said, Beasley, if someone goes down, that could be one of your top options come this 2024 football season. And Edwin Joseph, too, is someone that flashed way early on, too, last year as well. I mean, it's how Florida State's done a really good job and bringing in talent that, can fit this system really well. Let's jump over to safety to finish off this defensive spring preview, gentlemen. And VZ, you were telling us earlier, you feel
I don't love this group.
Whoa.
I like the top two.
You can go first then, because I
like the top two. I like Conrad Hussey. I like Shyheim. After that,
I like me some KJ Kirkland now. I do like me some KJ Kirkland.
It's another one you got to see it. We got to see it. We've seen this time and time again with practice guys showing out, and then it's got to translate to games, which obviously we're how many ever months away from that, 6-7 months away from that. But we've got to see it on the field. It's one of those, just like what I was saying with the corners, there's not much experience really at all, even counting Devontae Brown if he ends up going to safety. But he didn't play well last year at corner. Hopefully the safety transition is a little bit easier for him. I don't really love this group, I'm going to be honest.
Well, let me name these real quick. Shyheim Brown, Ashlyn Barker, Conrad Hussey, KJ Kirkland, and Devontae Brown. Ashlyn Barker, too, worth mentioning, like we were talking about earlier, too. Someone that kind of, impressed us a little bit more. Got more playing time than maybe we were first expecting. But Conrad Hussey, someone absolute stud as a true freshman last year.
He's a playmaker for sure.
Yeah. He's a stud and someone that, we're going to see a lot of most certainly in this 2024 football season. And KJ Kirkland, like I agree with you here, VZ, someone that we got to see it. And it just happens to be that we haven't been able to see it just because of what, Florida State already had in its arsenal with Akeem Dent last season. But someone that's rangy, lengthy, someone that was talked about a ton during, fall camp last year and spring. But what's your thoughts on this group, D-Lou, overall? I like this group. I'm not too worried about this group. Health maybe might change some things, but just on paper right here, I don't feel too worried about it just because of some things outside of Conrad Hussey, Barker, Brown. I like what we got with Kirkland there.
I like this room a lot. There's some real experience, there's some real talent, and then you look at what Florida State, at least traditionally, has done with their safeties. Typically, two guys soak up the majority of snaps throughout the year anyway. Maybe they trickle a third in there like we saw back during the 2022 season whenever Shyheim Brown was starting to make his rise. But I mean, last year, the reason that Conrad Hussey ended up getting so much playing time, not only because, he was playing in an elevated role that you would not expect out of a true freshman, was because Akeem Dent dealt with some major injury woes throughout the middle of that year, had that hamstring that popped up during the home opener that kind of took some time out of him. So I think Florida State, they're not going to have as deep of a safety rotation necessarily this season. But, you look at Shyheim Brown, he's taking that next step. We talked about his weight gain. He's taking the leadership role on as well. What really changes the ceiling or the floor of this unit is kind of how Conrad Hussey develops. If he's able to take that next step and start to become a defensive star at the college level, that changes everything for Florida State, because he had some really bright moments last year, but then there were also some really down moments as well. So I think it comes to consistency with Conrad. KJ Kirkland, another one, we saw him during the tour of duty, man. He looks absolutely terrific. I haven't got a chance to mention him yet, but he's definitely filled out, added some muscle to that, I think 6'2", 6'3" frame. And, he really impressed us at times in practice last year, but talented guys in front of him, dealt with some injuries that kind of kept him off the field a little bit. But I definitely like what he's bringing to the table moving forward. Ashlyn Barker, someone that we're fans of, and he's kind of growing ever since joining Florida State from the JUCO level. And then Devontae Brown, if he can kind of come in and keep a high floor for Florida State by being a solid veteran back there and the snaps that he's able to get, that would be huge. He's added some weight. You look back, he didn't have a good last year with Miami, but you look back to what he was able to do at UCF. And I mean, he did have some productive years there. And I don't think Florida State is going to be asking him to take on a necessarily major role in the defense. I mean, if he can kind of be a stopgap option whenever he's needed out there, I think that's the best that Florida State can ask for.
That's a safety room. I'm really looking to Shyheim Brown being one of the top leaders on this team moving forward. He was kind of already vocal before, and he has just owned up to being, I want to step up. And talent is really wild for him and Conrad Hussey. I'm really looking forward to year 2 Hussey. I don't know about you guys. I know you guys probably definitely are, but it's just he was a stud, and I don't think we were expecting that much of a jump that early on. But Coach Surtain, he's got a group at that cornerback, nickel, safety position. There's talent. I'm just interested to see a few guys make those steps and strides and see if someone wants to disrupt, like a Quindarius Jones, see if someone wants to disrupt that room that he's in. It's going to be fun to watch. I know Coach Surtain is loving every bit of it.
Yeah. And, it's the off-season hype train. Not all of this is going to come to fruition. There are going to be some guys who end up disappointing. But, right now everyone's an all-star. And that's just kind of how it is going into the spring. We'll see how things actually shake out. But, I mean, just like looking at this team coming into the spring physically, I mean, man, like there are some real dudes on this team. And it just comes to realizing what they can do on the football field and kind of translating what they were doing into the weight room now onto the gridiron. And it's going to be fun watching it over the next couple of months, because this Florida State defense, there are some huge pieces to replace, but I definitely think that they can do it if they just continue working at it.
Yeah, and we're going to find out which pieces really from the defensive side you're missing the most of. And I think we'll find out kind of early on in that 2024 football season, because there is some big time vets that are no longer on the squad that Florida State will be debuting over there in Ireland against Georgia Tech. So, and just to think too, for this defensive back room specifically, have fun with all the speed that you're having to deal with daily. Have fun. I'm glad I have nothing to do. I'm no part of that at all. That's not going to be fun, but iron sharpens iron, and they're going to have a lot of tests for them on a lot of bases from how Mike Norvell likes to run those practices. Have fun. Good luck. But that's going to do it for our spring camp preview. I'm going to hand this over to VZ, because this is going to finish up our show. Doing pretty good. Hour and a half is not bad for the amount of content that we just had to go through. But VZ, just wrapping up the 2024 basketball season, 2023 as well. But thoughts on, just the season overall, where it's headed, to you. We didn't report it, but, you were letting us know, Florida State not electing to go in that NIT tournament. Thoughts and looking ahead on, Leonard Hamilton and the Florida State Seminoles basketball program.
Yeah, so just real quick on the season. I mean, I don't know how many times I said throughout the year, this feels like a 500 basketball team, and we nailed it. 17-16 on the year. If they had lost to Virginia Tech, the opening game of the ACC tournament, they would have been right at 16-16. They just got there in a very frustrating way, and if it wasn't for Jameer Watkins becoming an incredible player, who knows what this team would have become. But they definitely made some improvements. They got back to forcing a ton of turnovers, which last year they weren't great at it. This year they're back in the top 30. They played much faster, which is how Coach Hamilton wants to play. And I thought they shot much better on the interior. I believe they're at 51.5% on 2-point shots. So Florida State wants to play. Again, it could be better. It should get better. They've got to add some 3-point shooting this offseason. They got to add some true defense, because if Florida State wasn't getting a turnover defensively, it was a basket for the other team almost every time, especially down the stretch in ACC play. There's games like at Louisville, where Louisville was just lighting Florida State up all over the floor. They were committing a ton of fouls, which, part of that is Leonard Hamilton saying, hey, we've got bodies, let's just throw them out there, and if they foul, they foul. But it's a big offseason ahead. Like you just said, Florida State did decline an NIT bid. I believe I was the only one to even say that, but I was told that was the case. Wasn't surprised. This didn't feel like a group that got along previously well, or got along really well. The coaching staff may have had some meshing issues with the team. Who knows? But the staff just decided, hey, let's go recruit. We've seen them be very active in the transfer portal so far. I've already written down 8 names that they've contacted since the portal opened Monday at midnight. So they're being active. They realize that they've got to fill some gaps on this team. And, I think Coach Hamilton is very hungry to get this team back to where it's supposed to be. It hasn't been where he's wanted to be the last few years, but we've seen with Jameer Watkins that, you just got to hit on 2 or 3 of these guys, and it's a much different team next year for sure. Will Jameer Watkins come back? That's arguably the biggest question of the offseason. Who really knows? He's definitely played his way into being an NBA-type talent. Just the way he was defending down the stretch, the way he was scoring, 19 straight games, finishing with double-digit scoring. I need to go on this tangent again. I already went on another podcast. How he wasn't on an all-ACC team is ridiculous. If I had still had my vote, he would have either got my last spot on first team or my first spot on second team. For him to be honorable mention was absolutely ridiculous. But besides that, they got to add some talent. I did like the progress Jalen Worley made. Thought Cam Corrin was better on finishing on the inside, even if he could improve catching the ball, and his free throw shooting kind of fell off a cliff this year. And I thought Bull Bowen showed some real flashes. I thought those are the 3 main positives outside of Watkins. Other than those guys, there's a lot of guys I would be perfectly fine with leaving. And hopefully we get those notifications here in the next couple of days that they've hit the transfer portal.
Yikes. Dustin, your take on the 2023-2024 FSU basketball squad?
It ended a lot better than I thought it was going to. Yeah, there were some really rough stretches early on, but, you think back to whenever they were able to flip the script kind of in January there. For a second we were talking about, hey, maybe Florida State has a chance to make a little bit of a run here. In the end, they just ended up being a little bit too inconsistent on both sides of the ball, and that's ultimately why they're 500. But I still think, like Austin was saying, there are some quality pieces on this basketball team where if you're able to retain them and then add some numbers from the portal and the high school ranks, I mean, you can potentially flip this team around and, turn yourself into a potential maybe 20-win team next season. All starts with Jameer Watkins. I mean, if you're able to keep Jameer, I think Cameron Corrin, Taylor Bowen, Chandler Jackson. I'm not sure how Austin feels about Jalen Worley potentially coming back for another year, but I think Florida State, if they can keep maybe, what do you think, Austin, 6, 7 guys off this current roster? 2 minutes. Okay, well,
I think that's too many. I think anything more than 5 would be a mistake, in my opinion.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Yeah, Watkins, Worley. I didn't really talk about Worley, but he shot 80% from the free throw line since the start of January. He showed a ton of progress with his form. He even started to take some threes down the stretch of the season. Even if he wasn't making them, he's at least got to take them. Jackson, we'll see. I like some of the moments he showed. I mean, 19 points in one game, 17 in another. He really had some strong moments in January and February, but saw real inconsistent playing time, so I'm not too sure there. Loved the flashes Bull Bowen showed us as a freshman. I didn't even know if he was going to play this season. He played a decent amount, and I'm going to go back to that game at Boston College where he was just all over the floor. He had that first game at Miami where he had 4 steals in just 8 minutes. I really like the progress he made, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him start the 4 next year if Baba Miller were to move on, or if Florida State was to move on from Baba. Whatever happens there, I have no idea what's going to happen there. And then Corrin, that's 5 people with Watkins, so maybe 6. 6 would be my absolute most that I'd want to keep.
But either way, you've absolutely got to keep Jameer because, I mean, you didn't necessarily know what he was going to bring over from VCU, but then he blossomed into a rising star at Florida State. I mean, his ability to take over as an isolation scorer while also rebounding, assisting, defending at the level that he does. I mean, he was Florida State's do-it-all guy this year, and he reminded me, honestly, and I've seen other people make the comparisons as well. I don't think I'm the only one, but he reminded me a little bit of Terrence Mann with his ability just to kind of do it all. So if Florida State's able to retain him, the type of talent that he is on the court and the leader that he is, that's a really good nucleus to begin building around.
I agree. He reminds me of a stronger Terrence Mann, because Terrence was more finesse. Jameer was, I see your chest, I'm going straight through it. And Florida State had a player like that since, correct me if I'm wrong, Al Thornton. Like, it's been a while since they've had a guy that can just bully someone from the wing. And maybe a little bit Trent Forrest, but he was a guard and just bullying other guards. It's a little bit different. Whereas Jameer he was bullying anybody. It was fun to watch him play. I hope he comes back, because if you can add one more piece like him, like a guy that I just saw that they contacted in the last couple of hours, Toby Akani from Illinois, Chicago, very similar kind of player, 6'8", lanky, athletic, averaged 2 blocks and a steal and a half. If you have him and Jameer on the wings, I mean, that would solve a lot of your defensive issues, especially if they go back to the defense they ran, when I was there, the 2016 and 2019, where switch 1 through 4 for the most part and then funnel everything inside of the big. I think that would solve a lot of these issues for this team, and I've heard some rumors that could be happening. We'll see what ends up happening. But there's pieces, just got to add to it. Got to add some shooting. I mean, they were god-awful from 3 this year. 31.7% is the second lowest of the Coach Hamilton era. And that's with having a guy like Darren Green Jr., who was supposed to be a 40% three-point shooter, and I'll say he kind of sucked from February on. Minus the Miami game. I do have to note that he was amazing in the Miami game. Not great outside of that. But they got to add some three-point shooting. You can't have another year where you're 31, 32, 33% from 3 as a team. And, even if Worley can just try to shoot threes, I think that'd help a lot. I know the staff feels pretty good about where his jump shot is at this point. We'll see what happens this summer, but I expect Worley to be back. He's developed into a very good leader for this team.
And we didn't really talk about it, Austin, but, at this point of the cycle, with the season have ended about a week ago now, and Florida State hasn't made, obviously, a public coaching move. It would seem like the intention is to roll with Leonard Hamilton and his assistants into the final year of his contract in 2024-25.
Yeah, the expectation is he'll be back, which I'm not surprised by. It's what I've wanted to happen. He's just one of those coaches that deserves to go out on his own. And like I said, he is hungry to turn this around. It's not like he's sitting back and just saying, whatever happens, happens. He's been more involved than I've seen him in close to a decade, honestly. And I really feel like he can get this turned around. It's also one of those, could you potentially make a change? Yes, but there's a lot going on with Florida State right now. Like, if you were to move on, how many coaches are going to look at Florida State and go, they're suing their conference. Do I really want to go there right now?
Yeah.
And it's not a great fan support for basketball. I feel like it's there for football. For the most part, it's there for baseball and softball and soccer. For basketball, it's real hot or cold. Like we just saw with Logan early in the podcast. If they're not doing well, they don't care.
No.
So it's hard to get that kind of support to get up and get a coach. I've seen some people say they're going to set up a head coach in waiting situation. Like I've seen it 3 or 4 times on Twitter. I haven't heard anything about that. A couple other people I know close to the situation haven't heard anything about that. So as of now, I doubt it. But we'll see. I'm excited that Coach Hamilton's going to get this last year, and we'll see if they make any changes to the staff. It's still early. Like March Madness is just going on. Like I'm watching the first 4, Grambling State and Montana State right now. So maybe as we kind of get closer towards the end of the tournament, closer to the end of the NIT, maybe you'll see a staff change here or there. And that's probably when the portal will really start heating up, even if it's already pretty full. But I think you're going to see more of that action towards the beginning of April as the tournament gets closer to ending.
Yeah, I think there's already been over 500 people 500 players
as of last night
since Monday. Didn't it open on Monday?
Yeah, but you also had some of the guys enter like late last week from like the coaches firing and grad transfers. So there was some guys there. But yeah, the official open Monday morning. I think it's over 600 as of this moment because it hit 500 last night. Yeah. So you're going to see close. If I had to guess, you're going to see close to 1,500 players in the portal this offseason.
Wow,
it's insane.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Before we wrap up fully, though, just real quick, some notes on NFL nulls, some things being changed around for these guys and free agency and trades. Number one, Jameis Winston is heading to Cleveland. Actually made it official today. He is a Cleveland Brown, leaving Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints. Thank the Lords above us. Get out of New Orleans. New Orleans, great place.
I'm glad he's out of New Orleans. I don't love that he's in Cleveland. I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation there with being with Deshaun Watson and getting paid a crazy amount for Deshaun Watson, and if health reasons wise would be the only chance for Jameis to get a really good shot.
He said how many times this offseason that he wanted to go somewhere and be a starter. Could he be a spot starter here in Cleveland? Maybe, but just with how much money they're committing to Deshaun Watson, that's going to be their number one option until they don't have a choice.
Yeah. I think he's got a good chance. I mean, Deshaun Watson coming off surgery to his throwing shoulder, had a broken bone, wasn't able to play much last season for Cleveland. It wouldn't surprise me if he has injury woes yet again. I mean, ever since Deshaun Watson has tried to come back from this situation that he's involved in, he just hasn't been playing good football. And, at some point the team is going to recognize that and, just have to cut its losses. We'll see if he's able to finally rebound, but I would lean to looking at what he's done the last 3 years and realize maybe sitting out that 1 year wasn't the best move for his football career because, it's set him back ever since, along with everything that he's dealing with off the field. But I definitely see this as a situation where Jameis, he can go in there and, if things go how they've been going in Cleveland, it wouldn't surprise me if he does get to start a handful of games next year.
Well, speaking of bad quarterback play, how did it feel to come off the cruise and realize you had signed Russell Wilson, Logan?
Oh, don't even get me started, baby. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? Are you kidding me?
You went from the worst quarterback room in the league to like the third worst. Congrats.
Not even close. Not even. Nice try, though, Vikings fan. Who do you even have at quarterback right now? Is it anybody that is like Jacoby Brissett's brother playing for y'all? Or like
in a month when we have Drake May, we'll come back to this conversation.
Drake May, sayonara. I won't worry about the Vikings anymore. Thank God Dalvin got out of there. But yeah, not worried. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, future's bright. Get Russell for a year. Let Justin sit behind him. We'll re-sign Justin Fields for multiple years, and we're set for our future. Definitely when we land Brandon Ayuk within the next 48 hours too from the 49ers, and we're absolutely loaded at that point on offense. And Arthur Smith, I never said anything bad about Arthur Smith ever. I've never said anything bad about him. So we are set and ready to roll. Defense, I already have a Super Bowl defense. TJ Watt's the best defensive, maybe the best football player right now as we speak. So set there on defense. Offense is going to be absolutely loaded. I've always been a fan of Russell Wilson. So I know, no joke. I've loved what he did in Seattle. I don't think
he was great in Seattle. He was phenomenal in Seattle. And then Denver made one of the worst trades of all time.
Yeah.
To get a quarterback who sucked in Denver. He was not good in Denver.
Denver, yeah, not his fault. Can't win everywhere. So now he's going to come over to an organization that strictly ran and full of traditions and none of that front office BS. We come over here and we're building talent around him, and everything's just going to be just fine, just what we need for Mike Tomlin and make that Super Bowl run. So I feel great. It's easy to go after Russell Wilson off the field. I hope we don't need all that off the field stuff and whatnot. I know he just posted a video earlier of him working out and stuff. Just try to keep that to a minimum. In Pittsburgh, that won't fly. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I feel actually confident. I've got freaking Justin Fields. Like, what are we doing here?
Who's not good either, but
At anybody, shit, you could put Tom Brady with the Bears. There's no way he's going to the playoffs potentially.
It goes beyond that, but he's just not very good. I've seen him play too many games. He's just not a good quarterback.
We'll see. Arthur Smith.
Let me hop in here. We were just notified Florida State's Pro Day will begin 9 a.m. on Friday. So can't wait.
There we go. Breaking news. That's going to be in the morning.
Can't wait to be stuck behind that fence while I'm barely awake.
Oh, God. You'll make it through. It will be fun. Pro Day will be fun. Real quick, though, Ronald Darby staying in going and going to stay, though, back in Florida. He's going to go play for the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 1-year deal. Derek Nottie, the Chiefs are keeping him in Kansas City. Congratulations to him. They do love him matched up with Chris Jones to the side, and he was dealing with an injury there in the latter half of the season. So going to be good to see him back fully healthy with the reigning Super Bowl champions. And then also, too, Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat was a guy that a lot of teams probably were interested in after a really impressive last 2 seasons with the Eagles. But he's going to end up sticking with Eagles and staying up there with Philadelphia. And Mario Edwards still kicking it in the NFL, man. Still kicking it. 2013 national champion. He has signed a 1-year deal with the Houston Texans. So
you missed the biggest one. Brian Burns getting traded to the Giants.
Oh yeah,
for a second and a fifth, and signing a massive 5-year, $150 million contract. Shout out to Spider.
Getting money. That, well, if you're back in your shoe game, man, I would hit him up immediately and be like, "Yo,
I'm just glad I got it. I'm just glad I got a jersey signed before he left Charlotte."
Yeah, exactly, 100%. But yeah, we got the pro day on Friday. We'll have a lot more coverage on that, and we'll be able to kind of split in between practice observations and jump into a lot of projections for the draft, as we haven't been able to talk about that in the last couple of weeks. But one of the best times of the year is coming up, where we're going to be talking some NFL draft, and there's a lot to like about a lot of these FSU players that are going to be heading into the pros this year as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode. A loaded one, almost 2 hours on here, but appreciate everybody hanging out with us. As always, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button, share with all your friends. Also, too, I want to mention our new member to Knoll Game Day and a new podcast added to the network is Tribe Check with Emily Peters, previously working with ACC Network, still does some work with them as well, ESPN. But she is dropping a podcast. She just dropped her pilot episode and is going to be doing some really good coverage for us on Pro Day, trying to garner up some vlog style interviews afterwards. So she just dropped her podcast. So you can find that. Just search Tribe Check. She just launched her pilot episode, just detailing a little bit about herself and what the show is going to entail. But it's going to be a variety. If you like baseball, I know a lot of y'all come in here asking about questions about baseball and some other sports, which we don't cover really too much or heavily on here at all. Go check out her podcast. Different style. She's going to be bringing a different style of content as well. And I think it's much needed for, our market. And, the FSU beat brings a different kind of style. And I think it's great. She's got a really good personality, and I think she's going to kill it with this show. So a ton of guests that she's trying to line up and everything. So give her a shot. It's called Tribe Check, and she's going to be launching and sharing an episode every Monday for you guys. So keep an eye out on that. She's also on YouTube as well. So if you're on YouTube right now, just go over and search Tribe Check Emily Peters, and you'll be able to find her. But yeah, appreciate everybody. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week. And we will talk to you guys next Wednesday, hopefully at 7 p.m. Peace.